The subway was my favorite part about living in New York. The New York subway has more stations than any other metro system in the entire world, which means that you could go underground and pop up just about anywhere in the city. I didn't have to own a car while I lived in New York. It was great. When I moved away, I couldn't help but wondering, why do so few US cities have metro systems like the one in New York? 12 cities have metros, though only 8 have more than one line. Why do some really big cities like Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, San Antonio, and San Diego not have one, while a smaller city like Cleveland does have one? 22 Chinese cities have built new metro systems since 2004, when the last US city built a new metro system. Why don't we build more? Well, it's not as if US cities aren't building new mass transit, though not at the pace of European or Asian cities. The fact is there are many different types of mass transit systems to invest in. Most cities of a certain size have a local bus network, perhaps with frequent service lines that operate at frequencies of 10 minutes or better between buses. Commuter rail takes commuters from far-flung suburbs into central cities. More commonly, cities will invest in either bus rapid transit or light rail systems for their high-capacity transit needs. Dozens of cities have light rail or BRT systems, and there are hundreds of projects planned or under construction. In contrast, only about 10 metro system expansions are planned or under construction. So why are cities choosing light rail and bus rapid transit systems over metro systems? Let's get the obvious reason out of the way first. Light rail and bus rapid transit systems cost significantly less per mile than metro systems do. Light rail lines can be built for as low as $43 million per line, like the one in Norfolk, Virginia, or as expensive as $204 million per line, like a line in Portland, Oregon. That may seem like a lot of money, but the highest per mile cost for light rail is still cheaper than the lowest per mile cost for metros. The price tag for metros can start at about $250 to $270 million per mile, like recent extensions to the San Francisco BART system. The most notorious price per mile has to be the 2nd Avenue subway in New York City, which clocked in at $2.1 billion per mile. Of course, the cost may have been worth it. The new line should ease congestion on the parallel Lexington Avenue line, which carries more passengers than the entire Washington metro system. Okay, so clearly metros are more expensive than light rail or bus rapid transit networks, but sometimes doesn't it make sense to spend a little bit of extra money? Metros can operate at the highest capacities, moving more people than any other mode. They accomplish this by being separated from traffic, either above ground or below ground. This separation means they can run trains closer together and achieve headways as low as 3 minutes between trains. All of that capacity only makes sense if cities have enough people to warrant it, particularly people living in dense areas around metro stops. Density is a key prerequisite for metros, or really any mass transit. A common rule of thumb is that neighborhoods with at least 7 dwelling units per acre can support a bus route. Neighborhoods at or above 30 people per gross acre can support light rail, and neighborhoods at about 45 people per gross acre can support metros. These aren't hard and fast numbers. There are other factors like context and connections to other modes that can make or break a new metro line. Unfortunately, many US cities don't have enough areas dense enough to warrant a metro system. Density is certainly important, but so is total population. One study I found tried to figure out how big a city should be before contemplating building a metro system. The authors concluded that a population of about 5 million people was a good benchmark. Only 12 US metropolitan areas have a population over 5 million. Of those, 9 already have metro systems. Only Dallas, Houston, and Detroit do not. It's probably not a coincidence that all of these are well known for their love of the automobile. So there you have it. Cities need to be big and dense to justify the high capacity a transit system like this provides. And cities need to be big and dense to justify the cost as well. While researching this video, I did pick up on another reason why some cities have metros and some cities don't, and I think it's really interesting. If you look at when most US metro systems were built, you'll notice that most were built in 2 clusters. Chicago, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia built theirs at the turn of the last century. Then there's a second rough cluster in the 1970s and 1980s, when the Bay Area, Washington, Atlanta, Baltimore, and Miami built theirs. Why are there 2 groups like this? The first group was clearly a product of the rapid urbanization that occurred in America's largest cities in the late 1800s. New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia had over 1 million residents each at that time. This was a time before the automobile, so most residents had to live close enough to walk. Upper-class residents could afford to commute into the city via steam locomotive, but crowding was intense. Thus, these early cities had the right combination of population and density when the new technology of electrified subways was invented in 1890. Now, I have to admit, I haven't found a completely definitive answer to why so many metro systems were built in the 1970s and 1980s. The best I could come up with was that local officials planned many of these systems in the 1950s and 1960s, when the nation was caught up in a massive post-war infrastructure boom. The federal government provided metropolitan regions with huge sums of money for highway construction, and it seems that they also provided some money for mass transit systems. Since the last metro building boom at the turn of the last century, many cities had grown to populations that warranted a metro system, like Atlanta and Washington, D.C. These cities took advantage of federal, state, and local funding to pay for these expensive systems, at a time when government and the public at large saw the need and wanted to pay. Some cities, like Seattle, almost built a metro system during this time period. Elected officials secured $900 million from the federal government to build the system. Local voters just needed to approve the additional local funding, but decided against it. The federal money earmarked for Seattle's metro went to fund Atlanta's instead. Interesting, right? So in addition to cost, population, and housing, it seems like cities need to take advantage of a new technological innovation or a favorable government funding environment. So when are we going to see a new metro system in the United States? There are extensions to existing lines planned or under construction, but no concrete plans for a new system. It's a shame. I want to be able to ride the rails like I did in New York, but in every major U.S. city. Seattle didn't end up building that metro network, but they are constructing a massive tunnel for the Alaskan Way Viaduct, a highway that cuts Seattle off from its waterfront. If you want to learn more, check out my video on that very topic. And if you want to be notified when I post more videos on city planning, consider subscribing.